Who Owns Alastors contract has been eating away at the Hazbin Hotel audience for weeks now, and unless you're not aware of this, there's actually only two considered possibilities for who owns his contract. Both of these entities are incredibly powerful, and depending on which one has the contract, will undoubtedly set the stage for his future interactions with the rest of the hotel staff. Now, these two options are pretty similar, but yet exceedingly varied, so let's break them down by category before we really examine who probably has it. The first one is Lilith. Now, Lilith makes a lot of sense because of two very distinct reasons. One is that Lilith was always musically inclined, and I know that sounds like an odd thing to tie back into this, but hear me out. Alastor is a radio demon, and Lilith's whole persona that we know about was tied into really broadcasting her power through hell. It kind of makes sense then that she might have wanted to collect somebody like Alastor who shares very similar interests to her, in particular broadcasting a message and controlling people. That's a pretty interesting tie-in, especially if you look at some of the architecture around like her character being a lounge singer, how she was said to empower the people of hell. There's some tie-ins with that we could allude to. The other interesting factor is that, as many people have noted, obviously they disappeared at the same time, 7 years ago exactly. Then they were both missing for 7 years. Now, we know where Lilith was. Lilith ended up in heaven for some reason. Now, many people speculate that Alastor might have ended up there with her as a hostage or a prisoner or what have you. That's not impossible, but it does leave many more questions. Not the least of which is, how did he get back? Why are they there? If they were there, were they prisoners or guests? It leaves a lot of options open that we would then have to consider. Hey, if you're liking this video, go ahead and hit the subscribe button because I'm planning on doing more Hazbin Hotel content in addition to other anime content. The second person who could possibly own Alastor's contract is a bit more difficult to explain as it relies pretty heavily on very limited evidence. Now, if you've been in the Hazbin Hotel audience for a while, you've probably heard of a character called Rue. Now, unless you've done some extensive deep dives into old VisiPop drawings and the wiki, you probably have no idea who that is. And I mean, fair, because VisiPop did a lot of original drops of characters and stuff that we won't meet for quite a while, but to shorten it, Rue was a single to two-part character sketch that was dropped by VisiPop and then talked about only one other time. After that, we have never gotten anything more on her directly. I will point out that despite the fact some people say we won't ever see her, that is incorrect. Her architecture is still seen in canon items in Hazbin Hotel. For one thing, the YouTube pilot has her symbol in it, and that is still canon, as well as the fact that 2 episodes of Hello Boss actually have it in it, and that is a canon show to Hazbin Hotel. Those are all indications that this character is still there, but will more than likely remain in the background for quite a while. Why that is significant is that if she is the one that owns Alastor's contract, it could spell a big problem for the cast. The big theory is that Rue is the root of all evil, because I guess that naming sounds really significant, but also a lot of people note that when this series begins, there is a pretty heavy root theme in the opening cinematic for the series. Tying that together, I can see where that connection comes from. Now, since we know Rue will be an antagonist, this does lead to the question of what does her connection to Alastor signify. Now, I'm willing to place an early bet on the fact that I think that Lilith's disappearance, Alastor's disappearance, and Rue all have a connection. I don't know exactly what it is, but I think that their disappearance 7 years ago will have tied to her in some way or form. If Alastor works for Lilith, obviously that is going to be he was assisting her in suppressing or sealing away Rue. If he worked for Rue, I think he betrayed Rue with Lilith and sealed her away, but his contract still didn't break, hence why he's so desperate for freedom in the first season of Hazbin Hotel. I would also like to note that I do think his deal with Charlie is going to figure in to his contract here because, and this is the significant part, if it has something to do with Rue, I think he's going to need her help with something's breaking the contract. If it has to do with Lilith, I think he's going to get into a conflict with Lilith, and his request might be telling Charlie to stay out of it, which in and of itself might be devastating, but I don't think you get an optional choice on what to do with a deal, as we've seen quite clearly with both Husk and with Anthony Angel Dust. It is really apparent that when you're bound by a deal, as long as you're stipulated within the contract itself, you're bound to it permanently. And I think the nature of that is going to get twisted here towards later seasons, so we'll be very interested to see where that goes. So what do you think of this theory? Share yours down in the comments below.